With a fresh delivery of blue plates, I was able to add some clouds into the background. I still needed the modified bricks to connect them in, but I was at least happy with how they looked. As I reached the first tree line, I got thinking it might be a good idea to build the background in sections, as building the full length as one unit would make it very fragile to handle. I figured I may as well divide it to match the sections of the main build, and the first section lined up nicely with plates in the background. I converted most of the edge to tiles, leaving 3 points of connection to the next section. I needed to work out how I was going to connect the background to the rest of the build. I could fix the water onto studs built into the framework, but the rest would be trickier. I didn't want unsightly Technic pins spoiling the view, so I had planned to build Technic bricks in on a second layer, but I'd forgotten to work out where to locate them before building. I only really had space behind the background for a single vertical frame, and I couldn't really move it forward due to trees and other obstacles. A frame couldn't be fixed just anywhere on the framework. They had to be in specified positions for the pinholes to align with points a Technic brick could be fixed into the background. The bricks were to be fixed in with plates poking out from the rear, so I had to make some modifications for this. For some reason, I mostly finished building the section before having to crack it back open to make the modifications, but thankfully it wasn't too difficult. I figured I'd test it out on the frame at this point. It was a little wobbly, but it didn't collapse. Stability was obviously a concern. I wouldn't want the background falling if it were to be knocked, but the best I could really do to strengthen it was install some extra lift arms between the support frames and the main framework. Section 2 didn't divide quite as cleanly as Section 1. The plates of the mountains were half a plate depth out of alignment, and there was a large cloud crossing the divide. I considered cutting the cloud in half, but the divide fell partway across one of the cloud's modified bricks, and I decided it would be best left whole for strength. The opposite end of Section 3 was also half a plate depth out of alignment, though this time there at least wasn't a cloud there, until I decided to put one there. Wanna watch some more building? So this is Section 2 of the background, which will stand behind the moving columns. It's not quite as wide as Section 1, but it will stand taller with the water, as this will be visible between the columns. I think the trees came out looking pretty good, and I actually remembered to build the Technic bricks into the background as I went along this time. I was unfortunately missing just one of the medium blue plates needed to finish the final cloud. I took a bit of a risk here, cautiously standing both sections up and testing whether they would successfully connect to and disconnect from each other. Fortunately, it all worked accordingly. Section 3 gave me a couple of issues to contend with. As this was quite a narrow section, the attachment points for the Technic bricks used to connect the background to the frame fell outside of the section. Centering the vertical frames only shifted the issue to the opposite end of the section. I wasn't confident in the ability of this tall, narrow frame to support the background behind the waterfall, but if I wanted to thicken the frame up, I'd need to move the background forward. Ideally the background would be up against the terrain, but this was prevented by the log bridge and trees. Leaving a one module gap would give room for the bridge, but still impede on the trees, so I could really only create one module extra space for strengthening the frame. Moving the background forward would mean fixing in new connection points for the water, so I kind of decided to push it back and see how it held up when I got to it. As I was nearing completion of Section 3, I thought I should really have a better idea of how the Dr. Eggman battle would be fixed in, as I'd need to run an axle through the background. While looking at the framework, I realised I was going to have to move forward the background, as I would need at least 3 modules depth to accommodate a horizontal gear. There was a nice gap between two frames, which would be ideal for installing a vertical drive shaft connected to the main drive shaft, and luckily a Technic brick fixed into the background aligned the wrecking ball perfectly. With moving the wrecking ball, it had created an imbalance in distance between the two platforms, so I had to lengthen the left platform to reduce the gap, then lengthen the same side of the right platform to match the appearance. I hadn't tested whether my wrecking ball design would work physically, so I thought I'd have a go at building it. I had designed it with the use of dark orange corner plates, but these were becoming increasingly expensive and hard to get hold of, so I had to modify the design to remove them. It was tricky building in smaller plates to replace them, and the result was far more fragile, but it still felt solid enough. Annoyingly, I hadn't ordered enough 1x3 jumper plates to finish the build here, though I found a way to work around this and finish it off stream. Thanks to a large delivery of sand blue plates, I was finally able to fill in the blank spaces where the waterfalls had been left from the background. I still wasn't happy with their design though. It was far too messy and looked nothing like the in-game waterfalls, so I cleared it out and redesigned it with a much cleaner look.